Well, good morning, United. It is great to be together. We are starting a new series this morning called Making Change. And if you couldn't figure out what that series was about based on the video, we're talking about money. And so maybe you were like, you manage money really well and you've never known where you've gotten those biblical principles from. Maybe you don't manage money well at all and you could use some help. And this morning, we're going to open up the Bible because I think it's a helpful book from some financial principles to learn about how we handle money. And we're going to be opening up the Bible together and reading from it. And if you don't have a copy of the Bible or you didn't bring one with you this morning, we'd love to get a copy of a Bible into your hands. And so we have a couple guys around the room right now that have Bibles that they're ready to pass along. So if you need a copy, just shoot your hand up. We'd love to get you a copy. If you don't own a Bible, please keep this Bible and just have it for yourself to be able to read and learn about Jesus by reading this Bible. But we'd love for you to have a copy because it'll be easier for you to follow along through our teaching time this morning. My name's Tim, if I didn't introduce myself yet and you're new here, I'm so glad that you're joining us. You missed an awesome time last week. You should have come last week because last week we had a bake-off. And everything at United, we kind of turned into a competition. And so it was a competition. We voted on our favorite, baked good or so forth. And so we had an amazing time, but there is a winner. So if you want to give me a drum roll real quick to announce the winner of the bake-off, and it is Desi Miranda. So I know she looks a lot like Nancy Shrew, but that is Desi. And so she, as us Americans call, tres leches or tres leches is what she made. It was a fall item. And I'm sorry to say, Desi, where are you at this morning? You're right there. I'm sorry to say, I went to get the Little Debbie's fall party cakes, and they were sold out. But you shouldn't be surprised by that because Little Debbie's such an amazing baker. You'd expect her items to be sold out at the grocery store. But I got you covered because her Christmas tree cakes were there. And so come up and get your prize for winning the bake-off. From one great baker to another. So everybody loves Little Debbie's there. All right. But it was a great time. It was beautiful weather also. We love doing some of these Sundays. We got another one coming up, Tailgate Sunday in the month of November, where we just hang out a little bit longer as a church community and talk and have fun together. And so it was a great Sunday. Speaking of food, though, because last week was a bake-off, another food thing that we've been hearing about for the past month is our food drive. And in the past month, we've been talking about ways to serve our community, specifically Owings Mills Elementary and high school, and making sure that there are some families there that have specific needs related to food and having enough food to survive. And we do this every year, at least once, sometimes 2 times a year, a certain type of food drive. And next Sunday is the Sunday to bring all of that food. So a lot of you have been inviting coworkers. I heard about some people inviting their sports team and inviting neighbors to participate. And so we want to encourage you to be generous personally, but to get those invites out. And next Sunday in the chapel is where we're going to be dropping off all of our food. If you want to help out, you can just write on your Connect card, hey, I'd love to come early next Sunday and help organize all the food that's being donated as we will bring it then to the high school and the elementary school the next day. So you can just write that on your Connect card. All right, what I'm really excited this morning is for this new message series. It's a series title that we're borrowing from Craig Groeschel out of Life Church, if you've heard of him before. And I think this series could be a real game changer for you and for other people in your life. Because the reality of money is that we're not just influencing ourselves, but we're influencing future generations in how we use money. Because the way that you use money is probably influenced by people that raised you, your parents or those who are your caretakers. And I've seen this personally in my home. My son Liam, he started making money consistently 2 years ago. And I watched him handle money. And as I've watched him handle money, I'm reminded of my father-in-law. My father-in-law managed money very well. He was very frugal. And Liam has become much like his pap-pap. And he is like looking down, smirking. All the kids are laughing at him because they know it's true. Because this is how Liam handles money. But why does Liam handle money like his grandfather, like pap-pap? Well, it's because his mom learned from him about how to handle money, and Liam has learned from his mom and myself as well. And the reality of how we handle money gets passed down to future generations. And for some of you, this is a really scary thought because your life is a financial mess right now. And you're like, oh no, if my kids handle money the way that I handle money and their kids' handle money this way, we're in big trouble. Maybe you have no idea how God instructs us to handle money. Maybe you just started making money, and this is actually a great teaching because you want to start thinking about, well, how do I handle money? For this series, Making Change, we're going to take 4 weeks to unpack God's design for finances and to live in a way that lines up with that. What does the Bible teach us about money? Maybe like these are teachings you've heard for decades because you've been following Jesus for a long time like myself. And I want you to know this morning, I'm preaching to me. I know what God's word has said about money for many decades, and yet I'm still challenged by it. And so I think this morning you might be new to the Bible and thinking about like, how does the Bible speak to finances and my bank account? And this might be new learnings for you. Maybe it's not new at all, but I think it still will be challenging if you open your heart to God's word this morning. And I'm going to give you the entire series up front. All right, in just 11 words, I'm going to tell you what we're going to learn in the next month. All right, and so today, we're going to learn less is more. Can you say that out loud with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Less is more. All right, great. That was nice and loud. All right, then we'll also learn stress is bad. How do we say stress is bad? Stress is bad. All right, and then we're going to unpack the crazy idea that giving is good. You want to say that? Giving is good. And then finally, we'll wrap up with tomorrow matters. Say, tomorrow matters. All right, so let's say all of these together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Less is more. Stress is bad. Giving is good. Tomorrow matters. Now, you might not intuitively understand how does this all relate to money. Well, you have to come for the rest of the series to understand that. But what we're talking about this morning is less is more. I think some of you might say like, hey, I think I get that concept. I think that makes sense to me. But the reality is this is not naturally how we come across money, that less is more. You know, when I got served dessert with my little brother, we would argue about who had more ice cream or whose pie piece was bigger. And which one do you think we wanted? We wanted the one that was bigger. That was more. You know, the earliest memories you might have of even whether it's a dessert item or toys that your friends had that you didn't have, more seem to be better. You know, they have more toys. Life must be happier for them. Or maybe you've compared yourself to a coworker who you know makes more money than you, and you're like, I work harder than them. You know, more is better, and I deserve more. We have slogans in our culture like buy one, get one free, or BOGO. We have infomercials that say buy now and you'll get this special product as well. The value size, if you've ever been to the grocery store and you see a value size of the certain grocery item that you're buying, what does that mean? It's bigger, because bigger has more value for you. All over our culture says more is better. Wealth coaches teaching us how to make tons of money. And I don't know if anybody who listens to what they say make money, but I know they make a ton of it. Last year in 2023, they made $4.5 billion telling people how to get rich. Well, I know they got rich. And I don't know if anybody that they told how to get rich got rich. But our culture, just look for it this week, says more, more, more. More is better. But that is not how God designed for us to enjoy life. The author of Ecclesiastes, in his minimalist approach to wisdom, puts a one-liner out there that I put on the screen for you. It's Ecclesiastes 4:6. It says, better is one handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after the wind. So what a helpful, simple image in this verse. Better is how many handfuls? 1. Say it out loud. Better is 1 handful than 2 handfuls of toil and striving. Like better is one of quietness than 2. I'll say it repeatedly this morning. See, better is 1 instead of 2. Less is more is what we're learning about. And when it comes to money, even the great theologian, the notorious B.I.G., put Ecclesiastes to music years ago in his own words. Mo money, mo problems, right? So he was reading this verse, and he put it to music. Biggie Smalls, he knew the Bible. 2 handfuls is mo problems, all right? So he got it. And if he got it, I think you can get it this morning too. See, what God does with this principle is to focus on what matters. See, less is more is meant to help us focus on what matters in life rather than having 2 handfuls of things that don't matter and actually make your life a mess and stressful, according to the author of Ecclesiastes. I want to ask you this question that I think will help us this morning. And it's, if you had 3 months left to live, what would you do with that time? Think about that for a second. If you had 3 months left to live and you got that message from the doctor, it was pretty definitive, what would you go home and do? What would you do that week, that month, and for those next 3 months? How would you use your time? In fact, you know what? We'll do what we did last week. I'll steal a play from Jake Winter's playbook here and have you turn to somebody that you're sitting next to, and for 30 seconds, just talk about what is your answer to this question. What would you do with these 3 remaining months that you have left to live? So go ahead on the count of 3 and answer this question together. 1, 2, 3, go. All right. Thank you for answering that question. I hear a lot of laughs, so it sounds like probably some good things. My guess is in that past 30 seconds, the answers that were shared were probably things like spend time with people, spend time with my spouse, spend time with my kids. Maybe kids didn't say spend time with my parents, but parents said spend time with my kids, or spend time with close friends. Maybe your answers might have been like, hey, I want to make sure I tell people about Jesus and tell people that Jesus loves them and the good news of Jesus. Or maybe you're like, I want to get right with Jesus. I need to make sure I'm okay with God. I actually went to Reddit and typed in this question, which was actually there. And I read through just almost a quick survey of 100 responses, and almost every single one said spend time with people in some form or fashion. Almost every single one. One said, it's like, I'm just going to throw a 3-month nonstop party to be with people that I love. And then one talked about, I want to get right with God. A couple comments were like, I got to get right with God and understand like spirituality and stuff like that. But and then not a single person, though, said anything about make more money. Not a single comment, and I'm curious to hear the comments out there too, did anybody say buy more stuff? Did anybody answer, I want to get a nicer house for those final 3 months, or a nice car? In fact, one of the things that I read that surprised me on Reddit were some people said things like, I want to go to Starbucks and buy everybody coffee for a day. Or I'm going to go to a restaurant and buy dinner for everybody there that night. Like really generous things. Like I'm going to go downtown to whatever major city this person lived near, and I'm going to give away everything I have to people that are living on the streets. Nobody at all said anything about have more, yet that seems to be the way our culture is designed, is to say more is better rather than less is more. Now, I'm not going to hinge like an entire message on one obscure verse, if you're thinking that's what's going to happen this morning. We follow Jesus here, and we love to look at what he says about things, and he says a lot about money. And so I want you, that you have that Bible in your hand now, open it to the book of Luke. That's one of the biographies of Jesus, chapter 12. Chapter 13 to 21. As you're opening to that, you might be distracted like I am by this light in front of me. There's not like a little kid in the back flipping a light switch. It's just broken. I'm really sorry about that. And so we'll just have to all deal with it together. But what you're opening up to in this book called Luke is a guy named Luke wrote a biography of Jesus' life and explored how Jesus lived. And one of the things you see about Jesus is he did live a less is more life. That was one of his guiding principles. He spent on necessities, not luxuries. And the passage that we're looking at, he's actually in the middle of teaching a message. All right, so he's like preaching about different things related to God and God's kingdom. And in the middle of him teaching, it says in verse 13, somebody in the crowd said to him, meaning they interrupt what he says. It's like one of you shouting out a question at me or telling me something like this, "Teacher, let my brother divide the inheritance with me." That would be pretty awkward. You know, like this guy's letting his personal information out in front of this large crowd, like my brother is not giving me my part of the inheritance. And Jesus says in verse 14, but Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" This is likely a younger brother. In Jewish culture, the younger brother would get a third of the inheritance, while the older brother got 2/3 of the inheritance. I'm an older sibling, and I kind of like that law. I hope we bring that back maybe. But the older brother must have been withholding whether it was the third or maybe even more than that. And this is likely the younger brother saying, like, I want my share of the inheritance. Jesus, speak to this. Speak to this issue. Help me out here. And Jesus is a very wise teacher. He's like, that's not my place. Like, I haven't even heard the other side of the story. I'm in the middle of a message here. Can't you understand? Like, I'm communicating about other things. But one of the things Jesus does is he actually stops in the middle of his message, and he kind of starts to deal with this in a different way. Because he sees something that all of us can relate to in this brother's, like, cry for help. Like, give me fairness. Did you ever say that in your life? Give me fairness at work. I'm not being treated as I deserve. I'm not being paid what I should be paid. My coworker's making more. That was my idea, and they're making money off of it. There's always this sense of fairness that we want, and Jesus sees this, but he also sees something behind it. Look at the next verse, because he sees something behind this desire for fairness, because he says these words, "Take care," or "take heed" in other translations, meaning look out. And he goes, guard yourselves. The Greek word here, actually, it says to guard yourselves. He says, be on guard. It means like to guard yourself, like there's going to be an attack. Somebody's going to come against you. And Jesus is saying, what is that thing that's going to come against you? And he goes on to say, take care, be on your guard from all types of covetousness. Covetousness just happens to be one of the 10 commandments. It's the 10th of the 10. Do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's possessions. Meaning to desire, to long for, to spend my time and energy on wanting what they have and trying to get what they have. And Jesus is saying, be on guard. And he's such a good teacher because he doesn't just like tell us like, don't break this 10th commandment. You know, this is a law, just obey it. He's actually kind of providing an insightful and helpful thought for us because Jesus is a good teacher and he does that. And he goes on to share that insightful thought in verse 15. Look at it. It says, one's life doesn't consist in the abundance of possessions. Your value and your worth as a person isn't based on what you have. You're not better if you have a nice car versus if you don't have a nice car. You're not more important if you live in a bigger house than somebody who lives in a smaller house. Your life doesn't consist in the abundance of your possessions. That's not where your value is found. And you know what? Not only that, you'll never find happiness in possessions, the lack of them or the surplus of them. Our quality of life is not better with more stuff. In other words, what Jesus is saying is one handful of quietness is better than two of toil. He's saying less is more. More is not better. More is actually worse, according to him. And in case you're not convinced of that, he goes on to share a story. Check it out in verse 16. He tells them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns, build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Jesus is telling this story. It's a made-up story. It's not a real person, but he's giving this picture of a story that people can relate to because they probably see this happening pretty often, where there's somebody who makes a lot of money. He's an amazing businessman. He doesn't condemn being an amazing business person and making tons of money. He doesn't say that at all. He doesn't say that's bad. Here's what Jesus says is bad, and if you notice the words that this guy uses in talking to himself, he's pretty full of himself. Look at my barns. Look at my crops. Look at all of my goods. I'm going to say to my soul. He's not even speaking to other people. It's me. It's all about this guy. And I am going to have many goods laid up for myself for many years, and I'm going to relax, drink, and be merry. This guy has tons of stuff, and he doesn't use it to help anybody. He doesn't invite anybody to enjoy it with him. He doesn't give any of it away. It's all for him. And Jesus says, you know what? The biggest problem this guy has, he doesn't have eternity in view. Because that night his life is taken from him. And then whose will these things be? Nobody. Nobody can claim them. He didn't share them with anybody. What a fool who kept it all to himself. And that's what Jesus is saying about covetousness, about greediness. He's saying, don't be stupid. This is a horrible way to live when you don't have eternity in view, because this man, he couldn't bring a single thing with him to the afterlife. And Jesus uses this story not to beat us up with the 10th commandment, don't covet. Shame on you, you covetous people. He doesn't do any of that. He just says, think about it. Don't be like this guy. Be smart. He actually says, be rich towards God, which we'll explore later on. But he's talking now about this is a dumb way to live, that more is better. See, this man was incredibly successful, but his life was all about what's good for me instead of thinking about anybody else. Does any of this make sense? And it doesn't. You know what? When I asked you the question to talk about, how would you spend those last 3 months together? I'm pretty confident none of you talked about how this guy lived his life. Building bigger houses to gather more things, getting more stuff, more money in the retirement account or the bank account or a nicer possession. All of you talked about what matters, people. And probably some of you talked about what really matters, God, which is interesting. The two greatest commandments are to love God and to love people. And naturally, even on Reddit, that's how people answered, who I'm not even sure if they follow Jesus or not. What do you want to do with your life? Here's the thing. Jesus wants you to live this way now, not just in your last 3 months of life. And so he's teaching less is more so that you can enjoy the good things now and not put them off till it's too late. This is the life that Jesus wants for all of us at the core. And I know that we want this too. And so his advice is look out, be on guard. Because there's going to be a whole bunch of lies out there that tell you differently. You're going to go to the store and you're going to see an awesome pair of shoes and you've already got like 40 pairs of shoes at home. Do you really need another pair of shoes or a new set of golf clubs? Is that really going to bring you happiness? Do you really need a new car when yours works fine? Do you really need another streaming subscription when you have plenty to watch on the few that you already have? Do you need to buy more furniture because you don't like this furniture rather than it's falling apart? Do you need a bigger home for more stuff, or do you just need to get rid of stuff and not have to buy a bigger home? Jesus is saying less is more, and I'll give you 2 suggestions for how to live like Jesus offers us in this advice. And the first is cut back. Some of us immediately need to stop buying things we don't need. John Mark Comer shares a statistic in one of his books. I'm a big fan of John Mark Comer, that a century ago, 90% of Americans were farmers. Wrap your mind around that. 90% of Americans were farmers. That means like 9 out of 10 of us here at United would be coming from the farm this morning. We lived off the land. What does that mean? That means living off the land, you live life based on what you need, right? Not on what you want. Now, fast forward a century later to today, 2% of Americans work in agriculture. See, there's only one family at United that works on a farm, and you all know that's the Downey family farm. We all want to be like them. And so, but seriously, this has completely reshaped the American economy, the way that Americans think about buying and selling and so forth. We buy based on what we want, not on what we need most of the time. There's a Wall Street banker who said this in 1927. Check this out. In 1927, a Wall Street banker, I'll tell you who it was in a second, said this because this isn't happening by accident. We must shift America, so this is when 90% of us were farmers, from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old have been entirely consumed. Have you ever done that? Put something away that was still useful and bought something new to replace it. We must shape a new mentality. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. This was said by Paul Mazur in 1927, who's the leader of Lehman Brothers, one of the most influential investment banks in the world. I'm not going to talk about cooking up conspiracy theories here at United. That's not what I'm about. But we cannot deny that bankers, salesmen, and marketing companies are appealing to our desires all the time and not our needs. Because when you buy this now, you really don't need this special product that comes along with it. When you buy one, you don't really need another for free. And Jesus says words 2,000 years ago that are very, very relevant to American culture right now. You are under attack. And the way that you're under attack is that you are being marketed and sold a lie that you need this, that, and the other thing in order to be happy. And you know that's not true. And Jesus said this 2,000 years ago. This will actually suck your happiness away rather than give you more happiness. And here's the deal. A lot of you are facing financial hardship because we're talking about money in this series. And some of you are facing hardships financially. And some of you are in debt significantly. And the reason why, let's just be honest, is because you've bought based on your desires and not on your needs. And the word that Jesus would say is cut back. Stop buying things you don't need. Here's an example of, I think, where you can cut back. When Maria and I were first married, one of our first homes that we bought when we moved to New Jersey was a small little ranch house. And the small little ranch house, it was small little rooms. It was less than 1,000 square feet. And our bedroom, we have a bed that we still have today that we're given as a gift at our wedding, and it's a queen-size bed, barely fit into the master bedroom. We actually had to buy specific or nightstand tables to put a tiny little lamp on. They were probably not even a foot by a foot, just to try to get light into our room. And so we could barely fit our furniture into this tiny little master bedroom of this ranch house. And then the closet was probably like the width of what I'm holding up right now and the depth of just something that you can barely fit in. And our house that we moved into was built in the 1950s. And so apparently 7 decades ago, people didn't have a lot of stuff. because we had one closet for the two of us, and it was a tiny little closet. Fast forward our life to when we moved back to Maryland from New Jersey, and we rented a house in White Marsh, and it was a newly built home. And the closet in our bedroom rivaled the size of our bedroom. The closet. And some of you understand walk-in closets. You might even put like workout equipment in your walk-in closet. You might have an office in your walk-in closet. Your closet is huge. And today, 7 decades later, we fill closets with more stuff. There's nothing necessarily new, but it's just more of it that we're throwing into these closets. Photos that are falling apart that we're probably never going to be able to look at again. And trinkets that we use once, maybe twice, or haven't used yet, still in its original package, is still sitting in this walk-in closet. And it's certainly not things that we need, right? How many of you walked into your walk-in closet this past week and said, I have nothing to wear? Or looked at your food pantries and said, there's nothing to eat. We have more, and more is not better. Less is more. We need to cut back from filling up our closets, our garages, our bigger homes with more stuff, because better is one hand of tranquility than 2 hands of toil. Life doesn't consist in the abundance of possessions. And here are a few questions and suggestions that maybe help you navigate this advice, is to cut back. Before you buy something, ask, what's the true cost of this item? And so before you buy that toy, does it have to be insured? Is it going to need repairs? Can you repair it? Are you going to have to pay somebody to repair it? How much time is it going to suck out of your life where you're going to bang your head against the wall saying, I wish I never bought this thing? Before you buy something, ask what's the true cost of it in time and money. Resist impulse buying. Second thing. If you have lots of shoes, I already talked about shoes, do you really need another pair? Here's just a suggestion to you. Exercise self-control. You see that thing, you want to buy it. Say, no, I'm not going to buy it right now. I'll come back to it later. I'll sleep on it. I'll wait a couple of days. I'll talk to somebody about it. I'll pray about it. In 2 days, see how strongly you feel if you still need that thing. Impulse buying is, I feel it right now. But if you have self-control for a day or two, you might be like, actually, I really don't need that thing. Here's another suggestion. Share and borrow. Create a community here at church or in your neighborhood where you let people borrow some of their stuff, where they let you borrow stuff because you're sharing and borrowing. I had 3 friends in New Jersey, and all of us, our primary source of heat, we all had wood stoves in our basement, and we would just load these stoves up with logs and wood, and we would try to live off the land as best we could without turning on that thermostat, in the middle of the winter, and our wives were freezing and hated us. But we were all running around chasing down wood and trying to find, trees that were cut down, bringing it to our home, and then taking an axe. And if we had a friend that had a log splitter, we're like, yo, let's get that log splitter. So that would make it a lot more efficient. And after a while, the 4 of us were like, let's buy a log splitter together. And we bought a log splitter together that we all kind of shared with each other and shared with others. And I know that people do that with power tools and chainsaws. I saw this morning one of my daughter's coats on another girl because it was passed down to her, because it was passed down to us. It's on its 3rd or 4th generation of being worn by somebody right now. And it's actually still fairly in style, I think. There's a lot of clothes maybe some of you are wearing. You're like, hey, did I see that somewhere before? Because maybe it's been passed down from person to person here because you're sharing and borrowing, not just tools, but clothes in our community. We could do that too. It's called a library. You don't have to buy a book for yourself. You could actually just borrow it from the library for free and return it. And you don't have to build basketball courts and pickleball courts in your backyard. You could just go to the school and play there. And so there's lots of different ways to share and borrow. And then the last suggestion I want to give you is live by a budget. I love to talk more about this. Talked years ago about budgeting. Dave Ramsey at Financial Peace University does an amazing job helping people live by a budget. Because the reality is, if you live by a budget, a zero balance budget, meaning there's no money left at the end, meaning you're putting some towards saving, you're paying off bills and debt, and you're paying off all the different expenses that you have in life. If you live by a zero balance budget, when all those desires come, you're like, well, I don't have money to spend on it because I'm living by a budget. So maybe some of you need to like, hey, I need to lean into that a little bit and find out more about that. But advice number 1, cut back. Stop buying things you don't need. Second piece of advice, clear out. Get rid of things you don't use. Now, if you're starting to feel like, hey, this is just like, is this a message on minimalism or some life hack? You know what? How about we just think about the words of Jesus? Jesus' instruction to us says, sell your possessions and give to the poor. Meaning, sell things you don't need and give the proceeds of that to the poor. We have modern day ways to actually live this out in our culture. There are stores like Goodwill or Restore where the proceeds of the money that is made in those stores go to serve the poor. When we moved into this facility this past year and we bought it and we acquired, the realtors thought that the church was being so generous and giving all the furniture, fixtures, and so forth to us as well. We did not see it as generosity because we had 4 dumpsters full of junk that we filled up from emptying this building out. But not only did we empty and throw a lot of things away, like, hey, that's wasteful or resourceful, like, we gave you an opportunity to take it, and you didn't take it. So, but we had 2 box trucks full of things that went to Restore. The very next day, I got a message from John Hale, who is our contact at Restore, saying they made $800 the very next day off of something that we donated. If you don't know what Restore is, it's a store in the big umbrella of Habitat for Humanity. And Habitat for Humanity is providing safe and affordable housing to those that are poor. We have ways in our culture to live out Jesus' instruction, sell your possessions and give to the poor. And I'm willing to bet that every single person here, no matter how old you are, can go home this afternoon and find something in your house that you don't need, you might not even want anymore, and it has value that if you sold it, it could benefit somebody else. And if you have a consistent practice of doing that and decluttering and getting all this stuff out of your life, it's going to have a huge benefit, first for other people, but second for you. It will help you to feel freedom from stuff. Because Jesus said life doesn't consist in the amount of possessions. He knew he was doing us a favor, actually. He knew he was doing us a favor from organizing a whole bunch of junk that we never use. Why are you spending time organizing a closet of things that you never even use? Your life doesn't, spend your time better. Throw that stuff away. Get rid of it. Give it to somebody who wants it and will actually use it. How many things in your home are time vampires? Our possessions sometimes own us instead of us owning them because we're fixing electronic toys and we're organizing closets full of stuff we don't use. And when we get rid of it, Jesus is saying, hey, this is going to benefit you because you didn't use it anyway. Now, I realize there's some reasons why some of us hold on to things. Some of us didn't grow up with much. And so in our effort to conserve and not be wasteful, we don't throw certain things away. And I understand that. But that outfit is at best a Halloween costume for this week, or maybe for the 90s theme party coming up, you might be able to wear it. But are you really going to use some of the things that you're holding on to? Some of us, the other reason is sentimentality, right? I remember this person gave this to me as a gift in that time, and it reminds me of that person, and I totally get that. But I think this is where the wrestling of Jesus' words needs to land with us. Life doesn't consist in the abundance of possessions. I'm glad that one person gave you that thing, and you have other things from other people that remind you of other places and other times. But if that one person gave you a thing that is making your life miserable, it's not helping you. Because the reality is, you're probably going to pass it on to another person. And they're going to have to do something with that stuff. You could do them a favor and just donate it now, because that's what they're going to do. Because better is one handful of tranquility than 2 that are full of strife. 2 years ago, our family was able to go to the Dominican Republic. And a lot of people are like, ooh, how was it? Was it really nice? It's like, well, we went for not like a vacationing reason. We went what's called a missions trip. we went to this village called Hato Diake, and we served a church there that was serving the children in the community and the people in that community by running like different field days and a sports camp. It was really great. Our family, for years, this was a desire of my wife and I, that our whole family would be able to do a missions trip together. And God was very kind to give us this experience to enjoy with other people here at United Church. So that's a picture of the team that was there. We have a picture of one of the field days and somebody teaching a Bible story. And of this time, one of the kids that became very loved by our team was a guy named S. Stephen. And so a lot of people would call him Stephen, but it was S. Stephen. And he, like everybody on the team, loved him, and he loved everybody. But he loved one person on the team more than anybody, and so did everybody else in this town. It was my youngest son, Toby. Because Toby could hang with all the kids. He could keep up with all the boys. He was new competition. And so they're like, in the morning, is Toby here? Can Toby come out and play? We want to hang out with Toby. And all the girls loved Toby too. And I'm sure in Spanish they were saying like, ooh, Toby's so cute. And I'm embarrassing Toby right now. Like, look at Toby. And so like Toby was like the stud of the trip. I know Mark wants to think that he was, but he wasn't at all. And but Toby was the stud, and he and Stephen, became best buds. They hung out together. Like they didn't share a language. They had no idea what either was communicating to each other unless they had a translator to interpret. But they had the common language of sports, and just to be able to play. And they became best buds that week. And I'm sure Stephen, who's a very friendly kid, he probably became best buds with somebody from every team that came there once a week. But he and Toby hit it off. And I remember when we were going through the community, we would go out into the community. We'd invite the kids and the families to the different things and programs that we were running and talking with them and just inviting them out as best we could with the language barrier. And Stephen, we actually walked by his house, and he invited Toby to come look at his house. And so Toby went in to walk at Stephen's house. This isn't a picture of his house. We didn't go in and take pictures and stuff of it, but it's a house that's similar to his house in the community because they all look very similar. And remember that walk-in closet? The homes, again, might rival the size of some walk-in closets. And Toby, standing in one spot of Stephen's house, can see where he goes to the bathroom, where he eats dinner, where he sleeps, and where he hangs out. Wasn't much to see. There was no carpet on the floor. It was concrete. It wasn't as clean as other homes that he's seen in America. And as a family and as a team, I think we were deeply impacted by the joy that these children had with life. They didn't have, bins full of balls at home that you just pull out and play with. They didn't have, streaming services or TVs or screens in their home that they can just watch. They didn't have, all the things that kids today can have in their homes. But it seemed like they had enough every time we spent time with them. It seemed like they weren't longing for more of the stuff of us Americans. It seemed like they were pretty content. And if there was a picture of somebody that lived out this verse that we're talking about this morning, I think we saw it in the DR. And we were really challenged by that. And that experience, just like any experience you could imagine, probably wears off a little bit. The power of that over time, you lose grasp of how that impacted you. But this is why Jesus, in his teaching, is saying to us, hey, you need to just make sure you're thinking. Be on guard. You don't have to have experiences to help you get this. You can just be on guard in how you think and make sure the way you think about money is that your life and your value is not based in how much you have in your bank account or the amount of stuff you have in your house. That's not where joy comes. You answered the question yourself at the beginning of the message where joy comes. It comes from people and it comes from God. And so I want to hold out a clear challenge to you. A clear out challenge is give away 100 things. Go to your homes. Maybe you're like, hey, I don't even know if I have 100 things, but see if maybe there's things that you're not using that you don't really need. Some of you, I think you can find 100 things. Maybe you're like, hey, I just have one bedroom and It's like maybe 50 things. You might need to change that number, but go to your attics, your sheds, your garages, look under your bed, and start to like really embrace, I don't need some of these things. Somebody else might need them, might benefit from them, and with the resources from that can go to help other people. Because better is one handful of quietness than 2 hands of toil and striving. Maybe you literally don't have 100 things. And so when I put out that challenge, you're like, I don't have 100 things. I'm just a time of life where I don't have enough to buy 100 things. Then just make sure you don't get to that place where other people are struggling because they have too much. Maybe you've moved to this country and you just think us Americans are just crazy. You have so much stuff. You know what? We have a lot to learn from you because we probably have too much stuff. And so maybe this challenge doesn't apply to all of us, but Jesus would still say, hey, you're living in America now. We're all living in America now. Be on guard. Look out. There's people that are meeting this week, spending their life, their salary is based on trying to make you think you need something in your life that you don't have and buying it. And they will be fired if you don't buy it. That's how powerful the attack is. And Jesus was on to it. And Jesus wants you to have a life that's full of happiness. And it doesn't consist in stuff. It consists in people and it consists in Him. Better is 1 handful of a good relationship with your kids than 2 of a whole bunch of toys that they left behind and they don't want to talk to you ever again. Better is 1 handful of lasting spiritual community than 2 handfuls of all these other pursuits that kept you from connecting with other followers of Jesus. Better is a handful of helping others than 2 handfuls of like that guy Jesus talked about, just being consumed with yourself. I know this morning that as I share these words, I know this not because of anything in me. I just know that Jesus' words connects to all of us. And I know that some of us are hearing these words and we are deeply convicted right now. We're like, I'm buying things that I should not buy. I need to stop. There might be spending addictions that exist in this room. There just might be cravings that we just continue to run from thing to thing and our hearts long for things. Maybe we're in the middle of the struggle right now. You're like, I feel stuck. I want to do this. I want to live less is more. And this could be different degrees that we feel this way right now. But I just don't think that I can. And so I know how to help you. And that's just by praying for you. And so as I've been talking, if you're like, yeah, I want this life that Jesus says is better. That life doesn't consist in the amount of my possessions, but life is found in Jesus and Him alone. I want to have a less is more life. I need that right now for my sanity, for the good of people around me and in my life. And I'm going to invite you in just a minute to raise your hand so that we can pray for you. Not to like call you out or anything like that, because I would be one of those people raising my hand asking for prayer right now, saying I need help because I feel stuck sometimes in living this way. This is a hard way to live. Jesus' words are very challenging if you're going to be really honest about how Jesus teaches. But I want to pray because I want to give you hope because God can help you. This teaching is not going to change your life, but God will. And He can if you open up your life to Him. And that can start with just saying like, I need His help right now. And so raise your hand right now if that's you. And if you're near somebody who's raising their hand, if you could just put your hand on them. Raise your hand if you're struggling with living less is more. Just don't be afraid. And then put your hand on them if you're sitting close to them. And let's all close our eyes and pray. God, I just want to thank you for these truly humble people who would raise their hand in a crowd, which is saying like, I want a less is more life, the life that Jesus offers me, so that I can find more life in Jesus, in the simple things of life, in the important things of life. Better is 1 handful of tranquility, of peace, of quiet, than 2 of toil and strivings. Lord, I pray, God, that your Holy Spirit right now would help these friends to truly believe and embrace this truth. Holy Spirit, work in their hearts, not just their minds right now. I pray that you would set us free from the relentless pursuit to pursue more things, so that we could pursue the things that matter most. God, your word is living and active, and help us as we raise hands, maybe even for some of us that didn't raise hands that should. Lord, help us be shaped by your word in our spending. Empower us to live a needs-based life and not a desires-based life. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys for doing that. I want to pray one more time this morning, and I want to make sure I am crystal clear on what we're about here at United. It's not about less is more, because I think in even seeking to live a less is more life, for us that could just be another new thing to chase after, to find satisfaction, to find hope, to find joy. And the reality is that we talk about every week here at United, that's only found in one place, and that's in Jesus Christ. Some of us are striving in our purchasing, in our getting more money for a certain lifestyle, and it's still empty. And it's empty because you don't have Jesus. The prophet Isaiah says, "Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. He who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money, without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread?" How true is that? We're spending on things that are not bread. We're laboring for things that don't satisfy in this life. Listen diligently. Eat what is good. Delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ear to come to me and hear that your soul may live. I want you to walk away this morning knowing that your soul can live, not because you decluttered 100 things, but because God emptied himself. He decluttered heaven by sending his son, Jesus Christ, to come to earth. He gave so that poor people like us in spirit, who are broken in our hearts and empty, can be filled, can have hope, can be forgiven, because we have sinned against God. And our greatest need in this life is not what we can buy with money. Our greatest need isn't a less is more lifestyle. Our greatest need is the forgiveness of sins and to be in a personal relationship with God because of what Jesus has done. And I want to invite you this morning, if you've never had this invitation, to follow Jesus, to find he's the one that your heart's longing for, to find there's satisfaction in him. And I'm going to close in prayer one more time, and actually close our time of teaching before we take what's called communion together. So let's pray.